Inside TV. This is Shamari with Be Inside TV, and today I'm checking out the Ultimate Grey Gardens Festival up in Harlem at the Maysles Institute. I'm here with Albert Maysles, the director of this fantastic film that has such an amazing following. There's a lot of people here today for the panel discussion. Are you excited?
Sure, I'm going to be part of it too, which is lovely. It took 6 weeks of being with these two women to make the film, but the two of them were so wonderful. The subjects, they supplied the two of us with a film that goes more deeply into a human relationship, perhaps, as a documentary than any other film. And for a lot of people, that was kind of scary, because in this country, in our culture, if somebody begins to open up to another person, oh, they're vulnerable, they're going to get hurt. And it wasn't the case with these people. And for all of us viewers, it's been a happy pleasure to get in on the lives of these two eccentrics. When we showed the film to the first commercial movie theater, the Paris Theater, there was my brother, Edie, I, and this woman that I'd never met before, Greta Garbo.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, many have seen the musical, the Hollywood film. There've been a couple of books. This book. See the film, and then I'll be back with you when we do the panel. Thank you.
How do you feel about that? About Big Edie and Little Edie not just being nonfiction characters, but now being portrayed by Hollywood actresses?
I think it's great. It's spreading the word that much further, and people are that much more interested in the nonfiction as well. Everyone who sees the film has their own interpretation, so people come along and want to expand that interpretation into their own film. Great, it's wonderful.
I can imagine some of the questions that people have just watching the documentary. Do people come up to you all the time and ask you different questions about Big Edie and Little Edie?
Oh yeah. Well, they want to know what it was that got them to be reclusives. And for me, it's easy to explain. They just didn't want to live the life of Bouvier's, an aristocratic family where people have a hard time really just being themselves. And by secluding themselves, living in this one house, never leaving in 20 years, they could really be themselves. And there was so much to them. One a beautiful singer, the other one a dancer and a fashion designer. You know, they had a lot to give to each other.
Well, it's amazing that she said, come, I mean, I assume she had a clue how they lived. It's that she said, bring the camera crew to my aunt's house. And it was like...
Well, what was that about? You were coming, you were bringing your camera. On the one hand, she must have felt some kind of shame about the way they were living. Didn't she know you would film them? And who were we talking about?
Lee
Radcliffe.
Oh.
Let's call her the princess.
I think, well, what happened was that one day, having shot several days, various scenes connected with her childhood, she asked that we take a look at an hour or so of it. So we put some things together, including the scene with Edie that we shot. And I think it was that moment when she saw Edie in it that I think she felt that she was upstaged. That I think is the explanation as to why she decided to drop out. And she did. We never filmed any more of her. I've often wondered what Jackie felt if she had ever seen the film. To this day, I don't know whether she saw the film or not. But I know that when we finished the film, my brother happened to meet up with Jackie just by chance at an airport and asked her if she was going to see it. It was showing at the Paris Theater at that time. And she said, well, I might sneak in. Whether she just walked in or sneaked in, we don't know.
You were only filming for 6 weeks, is that correct?
That's it, yeah.
How did you know when to stop?
At a time when we thought we had gotten enough for an hour and a half of film. Actually, we got plenty more than that. In fact, the book that is coming out has a good deal of sound that was recorded apart from what the camera picked up. And that has been transcribed into a CD, which is tucked into the book. So you get even more of the conversations in the book.
Big Edie and Little Edie are actually relatives of Jackie Kennedy Onassis.
Yeah, they're the aunt and cousin.
Do you think that if you had not created the film that people would have been up on that information, or do you think that would have gone more or less undiscovered?
Oh yeah, people would never have known of these two women without the film. And then, of course, they know that much more from the book. The Hollywood film, for example, could get into their past.
Okay.
And the original documentary could only film what was going on at the time we were filming them. I happen to know Jackie pretty well. I helped to make a film of her and JFK and Hubert Humphrey. And Jackie is the model of what these two women would have been had they not secluded themselves. And they would have been less happy. Jackie was not a model of happiness. Interesting, huh? They chose the right route after all.
Wasn't there this great recording where they're talking, like Edie's talking about getting married, and she's like, "Oh, I couldn't get married. I'm too Southern." Like they wouldn't. They wouldn't like.
I know she was talking about whether or not she could have married Joe Kennedy, and who died in World War II, and she would have taken Jackie's place in the White House potentially. And she said, "Oh God, they wouldn't have been able to stand me. It would have been the South would have been in the White House every minute." It goes on and on. Yeah, I feel like Lee really had to hide something of herself, and Jackie also. And Lee, when she was making Sisters, kept trying to get everyone to speak about her father, who was a big philanderer, and no one wanted to tell her anything. And here was Big Edie and Little Edie, who were completely free to say everything. Although sometimes Big Edie would say, "Oh, Little Edie, you shouldn't have, Edie, you shouldn't have said, it's going to go out to the Queen in England." But I think Lee, on some level, wanted something of herself exposed, but couldn't quite do it.
I mean, I think no one could ever have imagined that Jackie and Lee, who were the younger cousins by 8 and I think 11 years respectively, and Little Edie was the it girl at the Maidstone Club, and she was the one who was kind of destined for a very public, seemingly for a very public and celebrated life, either through a celebrated marriage, that she ended up being a reclusive shut-in, and that the two younger ones ended up living their lives very publicly on the world stage. But then in the kind of unbelievable and very American third act, Edie and her mother again kind of take the stage at the last minute by being themselves, by being recluses. I mean, you just could never. I mean, you could never imagine that.
I almost think also that, to me, I see the mother, Big Edie, almost as being more like Jackie and Lee, or Jacqueline and Lee, because she is, especially having seen the musical, having, the Beales of Grey Gardens, seen more and learned more about the family. I mean, the stuff that the mother says is just lies, basically. I had a terribly successful marriage, and beautiful, it's all just bullshit, revisionist bullshit. But Little Edie is the opposite, and to me, for a big phase of my, I have many phases, as we all do, of my Grey Gardens education and what I'm obsessed with and love. For a while I was obsessed with it. Anytime that Little Edie was on camera alone with you guys, the mother immediately would scream from upstairs about something. Like she was totally felt upstaged and totally felt threatened by the daughter. And he was only happy when she was, it was a close-up of her, sugar cake. So anyway, for whatever that's worth, maybe I have mother issues of my own. That was 10 years I was obsessed. Like, the mother's a monster, why can't she let Edie do her VMI dance in peace?
Mrs. Beale shared a moment with me where Edie had seen and dated Howard Hughes, and he had come to the mansion wearing Kleenex boxes on his shoes. And Edie was, actually, I think Edie was uncomfortable with his eccentricity. And Mrs. Beale said, I will never forget what she said, this is a story. And she's telling me the story about Howard and Edie. Mrs. Beale is telling me about Howard Hughes and Edie courting with him wearing Kleenex boxes in the mansion. There was a rivalry all the time, but often enough there was a peace about and safety amongst each other there. There was a comfort level where after all of the arguments and all of the disputes were done, it was a safe place where they were comfortable. I felt comfortable. It was a refuge to be who you were. I was proud of them.
It's interesting, two of my favorite lines are both from Edie, little Edie. One is, I guess I'll get out of here when she dies, or I die, which I say that to my mother a lot. And then later in the movie she says, she's a lot of fun. I hope she doesn't die.
And I do think that I think we certainly have mother issues to spare, which is probably why we're drawn to this property. But I do think, when we were working on the musical, Albert cautioned us very, very early on to not be too partisan in terms of where our allegiances were with the mother or with the daughter. And he kept saying, you don't understand. It's not one or the other. They're both true and they're both right. And there's literally a gray area in between where they were competitive, but they also, and there was a lot of resentment and a lot of blame and a lot of love, I think.
Any discussion is incomplete without considering what the critics had to say about it.
Yeah.
And Walter Goodman was the critic for the New York Times who wrote that it was a cinema verite sideshow. And between lines, it was clear that he thought that these two people were just too crazy. And so Edie wrote a letter. And the letter and the Walter Goodman piece are both in the book. And the letter was such an example of kindness and understanding and just a brilliant response to his outlandishness. And but nothing happened to the letter. It went to the editor of the Arts and Leisure section, and nothing happened. So I called the editor, whom I happened to know had a wife as a schizophrenic in a mental hospital. And I said, have you read it? He said, oh yeah, we got it. Are you going to publish it? Oh no, she's schizophrenic. And it never got published. And another thing that happened was, and there should be a letter to the editor of the obituary section, because so many times they get it wrong, and there's no answer to it. Okay, so the public never got Edie's letter, and but they did read the obituary of Mrs. Beale when she died 2 years after the film. And in the obituary it said, the two women were the targets of the film made by the Maysles brothers. And no way to answer it.
I'd also encourage people, if you haven't seen the companion documentary, The Beales of Grey Gardens, you should really check it out. It has additional fantastic costumes, additional fantastic wise sayings from Edie, and it's a wonderful document. Again, kind of cut from the original, from additional footage from the original shoot.
She had a formula that she states in that film for ending war.
They only sent the kind of weak, sickly ones. The wars would be over much more quickly. And there is a kind of cracked sense to that. It's true.
I think it's important that she mentions the war should be against the law. I think that's really exactly.
But she also talks in that movie about corrupt Republican administrations and high prices and kind of oil and OPEC, and it's really it's very prescient. I mean, she was. I don't want to say she was
going up. She would that on the radio last
I don't want to say she was a sage, but she was.
She would have voted for Obama. No.
Absolutely.
Watching Be Inside TV.
Check us out on the web